Welcome to Chapters of Legend, a podcast for people who hope to slow down, read deeply, and get lost in great stories. My name is Cyrus Civilius, and each week we'll be exploring a new chapter, unpacking the characters, the craft, and little moments that turn pages into legends. This season, we're diving into Jade City, so grab your tea, find your reading nook, and let's begin the next chapter together. Chapters of Legend, Season 1, Episode 1, Meeting the Family. So in this episode, we are covering chapters 1 to 4 of Jade City. And let me just say, right off the bat, what a crazy hot start to the story. I'm feeling so invested in the story in just these first 4 chapters. I really enjoyed the way that we meet all the different characters of the Call family and of the No Peak clan, and I really feel, in particular in these first 4 chapters, that the world building was done in such a beautiful and subtle way. There was many times that Fonda Lee was just dropping little bits and pieces here and there, and not telling you what they were, just little terms, and eventually, just by continuing to read, all those things kind of came into the light. And I really like that. I like the way that, at least so far, like 40 pages in, the way that she's been world building, I really appreciated it. And so, at least as I understand it so far, right, within these clans, right, so we've been following the No Peak clan, primarily in these first 4 chapters, and within the clans, basically the hierarchy are Lantern Man, which is basically an ordinary civilian that can't use Jade, a Jadeless civilian, they call it, but they report to the clan, and so they are kind of civilians on the ground that give some money to the clan, all that kind of stuff, and for protection, that kind of thing. Then there are Fingers. Fingers are lower level greenbones, so they can use Jade, and they are basically the folks that kind of seem to me like they're kind of like on the ground, right? They're moving around, getting information. Then there are Fists, which are greenbone, kind of seem like greenbone enforcers. They are stronger green bones, and then there's the Horn, it kind of seems like the Horn is like the left hand of the pillar, and all the Fists report to the Horn. So the Horn is kind of like the leader of all the street level operations of the clan, it seems like. Then there's the Weatherman, and the Weatherman is basically like the right hand to the pillar. So the Weatherman and the Horn, effectively, it sounds like have the same rank within the clan and the same amount of respect. The Weatherman, though, is supposed to basically be supporting like strategic initiatives and business deals and all that kind of stuff for the pillar, and the pillar is the head of the clan. And so I think that is the way I understand it right now, kind of like a breakdown of how things work. And so I thought that was a really interesting way. Again, this is at least the way it was pitched to me was kind of like a fantasy mafia story, and I'm already clearly seeing like, you know, the Don, the Capo, like all these kinds of things within this story that, again, has similar roots to a mafia story. So I was really liking that, but again, all those little things as they were getting dropped, you know, finally would just say, this person is a Finger. And at first I was like, what does that mean? Right? What does that mean? And then eventually it kind of goes in. So I really liked the way that was happening, and just like getting to learn some of the history of everything. It was really nice. I think we're just going to start by jumping in and kind of going through the chapters a little bit here, and I'll kind of highlight some interesting moments for me as we were going through. So, like, first off, right off the bat, within the first paragraph, the end of the first paragraph reads, "The city of Janloon was like a spent lover, sticky and fragrant." And I read that and I was like, okay, Jesus, that kind of sets the tone for what kind of story this is going to be. I didn't know, I mean, it's a mafia story. Obviously, it's going to get rough. But I wasn't sure how explicit it would be, and that kind of set the tone of, okay, yeah, this is going to be a bit explicit. And so in this first chapter, we're following Barrow, who is a Jadeless civilian, and he effectively has kind of created this plan to steal some Jade off of a low-level Finger in the No Peak clan. And I really like kind of starting off from Barrow's perspective and kind of getting to hear a little bit of what it's like to be somebody who can't control Jade, and what it feels like to be that person who wants that wealth. I think it also highlights the disparity in wealth, kind of like right off the bat, how this is somebody who is struggling. They're struggling, they want more, and they effectively see an opportunity to get that through stealing some jade off of a low-level guy. So Barrow's kind of trying to do that. He has effectively brought in Sampa, who is this Abuki teenager, and that's an important note as you find out later, because Abuki can handle jade without any consequences, whereas the only people that can actually get the benefits of jade, the magical benefits of jade, are Tikanese people, which Barrow is. And so they've effectively kind of concocted this plan to drug Junonru's drink and try and kind of drug him so he can fall asleep so they can take the jade. And for all intents and purposes, it's working pretty well for them as they're going through it. But right at the end, right as they're kind of pulling it out, they yank one of the earrings out of his ear and wake him up, and he kind of goes crazy, breaks all the doors, and Barrow manages to kind of run out with 2 pieces of jade in his hand. And as he runs out of the kitchens, he basically screams out, "There's a jade thief in the bathrooms," and kind of starts to run away. And really just throws Sampa under the bus. I mean, he was planning to do that anyway. It was pretty clear he was planning to do that. But right off the bat, he's just like really getting to know what's going on here. One moment that I liked as well, that, again, you're just starting to learn. So you start off from Barrow's perspective, you start to then go through Hilo's perspective as you're learning about what's happening and his kind of concerns of what's going on, and also kind of learning that he is the horn of the No Peak clan. And that although he's the horn, he often goes unrecognized in places. I think that's going to become an important factor later, that people don't recognize him, or don't often recognize him. I just think that's going to be pretty important at some point in the future. But so, at the end of the chapter, like I said, Barrow's running out, and he just leaves Sampa behind, completely leaves him behind, runs up, and he's starting to feel the effects of jade. And again, getting to read this through his perspective of somebody who has never borne the effects of jade before, and how he is feeling it, and how he feels like everyone in the whole building is so incredibly slow, and that he must be experiencing lightness, that he's moving so fast up these stairs that somebody tries to reach out for him, and it's like the person is moving through molasses, right? Like he's just able to see everything. He breaks through this door on the ceiling and is about to jump off into the waters, and just gets grabbed and yanked back into the room. And just like, it's not going to go good for him. You can tell already that is not going to go well. And so we jump into chapter 2, the Horn of the No Peak, and you start to learn about Hilo. And so they take these 2 teenagers, bring them downstairs. You have Shanju, who is just freaking out, right? He is just freaking out. He wants his jade back. He wants to kill both of these teenagers, and he's just really on just complete another level, right? And I think that this whole exchange between Cole Hilo and, Shanju and all the people in the restaurant and everything that goes on with Mr. Une, the person who runs the restaurant that they're in, it was just so well done. I think what I wrote down right afterwards was it was so classy, right? As a clan member standing up there and delivering kind of like these speeches, and everybody can go back to their dinners, please, no problem. We don't want you to deteriorate your dinners here. Mr. Une runs a great place, all these kind of things. It just felt so well done. And especially at the end, him saying to Mr. Une, send us the bill for the damage and I'll take care of it. Right? I'll take care of the damage to the door upstairs. Just all of that felt so classy. So immediately I'm really liking Hilo's style from this chapter here. Just the way that he's moving about the world, I think, is really, really well done. And so then they basically bring Barrow and Sampa outside and start just beating the ever-loving crap out of them effectively. He sends the Mank brothers on them, and these are basically 2 fists that work directly with Hilo and that are very, very loyal to him, and just go on to just, like I said, beat the crap out of them, but again, not making sure that they're alive, right? It was a very clear, it seems in the text that the Mank brothers are very precise. They're not going to go overboard. They're not going to get overrun with bloodlust. They're just going to go beat them. And right there, we're learning a lot about what's going on. There's a paragraph here where I just kind of put in that you learn so much in this one paragraph. So Hilo was 27 years old, but even he remembered a time when cars and televisions were new in Janloon. Now they were everywhere, along with more people. New factories, foreign-influenced street foods like tempura meatballs and spicy cheese curd. The metropolis strains it seems, and it felt as if all the people, green bones as well, strained with it. There was an undercurrent, Hilo thought, of everything running a bit too dangerously fast all the time, as if the city were an oily machine cranked to its highest setting, teetering just on the edge of out of control, disrupting the natural order of things. What was the world coming to? That a couple of clumsy, untrained dock brats could figure on stealing Jade off a green bone, and nearly succeed. That paragraph, I think, just really sets the scene again. It goes right back to that world building that I was talking about at the beginning, where Fonda Lee is just kind of expertly building out this world, that technology is pretty new, all these things, but specifically that last little sentence there, that what's the world coming to, that two untrained brats can try stealing Jade and almost succeed. I think that in particular is going to become important. I don't know, but it was really telling to me. And so as he continues here, he orders the Make brothers to stop beating the kids, and effectively he's about to kill these kids when Sampa kind of says, hey, listen, I know what's happening. It'll never happen again. I'm so sorry. And he drops a little piece of information that Hilo mentioned in that first chapter, that if it wasn't for the new carver killing Guy, that he wouldn't have even thought about doing this. And that piques Hilo's interest, because in the first chapter, he's talking about, he wants to know what happened to Three Finger Guy, who was basically a kind of black market jade seller. He doesn't work for the No Peak clan, but just somebody that they haven't seen around in a while, and they kind of know who he is. And in that right there, that clearly just saved his life, because he says that, and Hilo takes immediate interest and is like, what do you mean? What do you know? What happened? And Simba basically tells him that he doesn't know exactly, but he was killed, and there's this new person that's taken over, that's taking all the uncut jade and is selling it or buying it for nearly half the price of what he used to pay, and all these things. And he says, okay, we're not going to kill these guys. We're going to take them to go see the pillar. And now we switch perspectives here. We've been kind of in Hilo's perspective, and we start to look at it from Lan's perspective, Lan Shiwan. And it's just a totally different perspective immediately. Like, the way that Hilo is, the way that Lan is in these next two chapters, you can just tell the difference between these two brothers. So it was just immediately evident that they're so different. So it kind of starts off by you finding out that Lan has some problems. He's having trouble sleeping, but he doesn't want to go see anybody because he doesn't want people to know that the pillar is having health problems. And again, right away you're getting to see that all this pressure that's already on this man with all the things going on. He can't sleep. He can't even go to talk to a doctor about that. And so it's very, very interesting to see that. There was one particular paragraph here that was so beautiful that I'm going to read out here, but I thought it was funny. He goes up to the gardens and he's sitting, and he basically says, I'm finally able to relax. And I just laughed, and I was like, well, you're not going to be able to relax for very much longer, because your brother's on his way with some teenagers, and it's not going to take long. But the paragraph that I thought was just so beautiful was, he sat down on a stone bench and closed his eyes, settling into his own heartbeat and breath, into the steady churn of blood through his veins. He explored unhurriedly. He followed the wing beats of a bat overhead as it darted this way, then that, snatching insects out of the air. From the breeze skimming across the small pond, he picked out the scent of blooms, orange, magnolia, honeysuckle. He searched along the ground for the mouse he'd sensed earlier and found it, a hot spot of thrumming life, stark and bright in the darkness of the lawn. And again, just such a beautiful way of highlighting what Jade is able to do, how he's able to track these people just by sitting there with his eyes closed. Really, really nice. But then right immediately after that, you find out how he learned that, and how, I guess, the Call Dushuron Academy is pretty brutal, that he was locked in a completely dark pit with 3 rats that were just running around. He had to find the rats and kill them with his bare hands using only his Jade abilities. does not sound very fun to me, and I'm sure we'll learn more of the pretty horrible things that happen at that academy for them to become green bones. And so within this chapter now, we're starting to meet other people that are in the clan. So we meet the Weatherman, and Yon Durapon is his name, and he, importantly, used to be Lan's grandfather's Weatherman before Lan was appointed pillar of the No Peak clan. And this becomes effectively a point of contention between the two of them, and we'll bring that up in the next chapter here, but basically he starts to think, I need to get this guy out of here. He is, he's stuck in his old ways, and Lan effectively wants to be his own pillar. He doesn't want to be his grandfather. If he did, why would he become pillar in the first place? And so he really is struggling with this idea, because Doru basically comes and is providing all this advice that's the exact same things that all of his grandfather would do. And he just wants to be his own man. And so we'll get into that more in the next chapter, but he's already starting to think about it, already thinking, I need to appoint my own person in this Weatherman role. And I also just wanted to say, as I'm reading through this here, we start to get little bits and pieces of what happened in the war previously, and how apparently the Call and the Eight family, and so basically the No Peak clan and the Mountain clan, which are huge rivals, used to work together. And I'm really interested in what happens, and thankfully, in this next chapter, in chapter 4, we actually learn a little bit of what happened in that time. So I'm excited to go over that, because it was just so cool, and I almost wish we got a whole book about that, because that also sounds like such an incredible story, but I'm sure more pieces will be dropped here and there as we're going through. But so basically at this point now, Hilo arrives, and he brings the people to Lan, sits them down, and then tells them, Sampa tells Lan, the pillar, everything that was going on. And so through that, basically, Lan's like, okay, this is good information to know, and basically sends them off. He says, don't let my brother find you again. You're all good. Go. Hilo disagrees with it. He would have probably let Sampa go, but Barrow, he's like, Barrow's no, he's just not good news. Like, it's not going to be good. Letting him go is going to come back to bite us in the butt. But you're the pillar. We'll do what you say. And so eventually, he lets them both go. And now we're basically in a point where Hilo is basically saying, we need to move on this. We need to move on this right now. We can't let the Mountain Clan be invading our territory, because effectively they think that the person that would have replaced Three-Fingered Yi is this guy named Temben, who is a Stone Eye, which is basically somebody who was born to a Greenbone family but cannot be affected by Greenbone, not in a positive way with the magic, but not in a negative way either. And so they think that Hilo thinks that Temben has replaced Three-Fingered Yi, and that he is a descendant in the Mountain Clan. And so he's like, these people have implanted him here, specifically in our territory, to try and spy on us. And he thinks that it's Ait Maida, who is the new pillar of the Mountain Clan, since Ait Yugontin died. And he's basically saying she's trying to implant ourselves into our territory. We've been hearing little bits and pieces about how there's already contention in other areas of the city that is basically already disputed. In the Armpit is what the district of the city that's already disputed district, and that the Mountain Clan is already kind of bringing folks in and doing stuff there. And so Hilo's like, we got to move on this right now. We have to go into the Armpit and just effectively kill a bunch of fingers of the Mountain Clan and just establish our authority in the area. And Lan does not think that's a good idea. Duro is like, absolutely not. This is insane. This is crazy for you to do that. It would be, you're just jumping to such extremes, effectively, is what Hilo wants to do. And, Duro's like, no. Basically, Duro's like, are you an idiot? Like, why would you do that? And Lan, I think, pretty diplomatically is able to find kind of like the best of both worlds here, and says, okay, well, why don't we do this? You send some people in just to see what's going on, and then we can kind of take it from there. And it kind of appeases both of them. But yeah, it was really interesting to see that. And again, he's just like demonstrating that he's also a pretty good leader, but he also right off the bat is talking about how Hilo is so hot-headed and all these things. And effectively, like, I left chapter 2 thinking, man, Hilo is awesome. Like, so classy, so good. Like, a good leader, all these things. And now from this perspective, I'm hearing, oh man, Hilo is hot-headed. He's always gonna just go crazy, do these things. And so I'm like, okay, getting two perspectives here. This is good to know. I still like Hilo, and I think that he might be right. We'll see what happens there, but I can empathize with Lan's position of like, wow, I mean, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place basically here, and what do I do in this situation? And so you're like, okay, Hilo and Doru are starkly opposed on this. What do we do here? And yeah, he comes up with this middle ground to be like, okay, we'll do it this way so that we're able to learn what's going on before taking any larger measures, I guess. And so when we have all this, and again, right towards the end of this chapter here, we find out that Lan is effectively going to go and confront his grandfather. And that's chapter 4, is the Torch of Kekon. And in this chapter, like I said, you start to actually hear about, because when Lan walks in and goes to meet his grandfather, called Seningtun, he's kind of sitting in a revelry, I guess, right? And starts to reflect on the war, and unfortunately thinks that Lan is his father, is Du, his father. And I mean, I don't know if it's a bit of dementia that's going on there for his grandfather, for Kalsen, but clearly there's something going on there. And so he immediately mistakes Lan for Du, but in doing that, you kind of hear a little bit about the war. And it was just, it sounds so cool how basically the One Mountain Society came around and from the forest drove out this invading force, or this force that had held the land. It sounded like I'm excited to hear more about that as we go on, but I really liked that aspect, and I wanted to hear it. And it's funny, there was one section where Lan thinks to himself, this again, the same old war stories. Lan steeled himself to be patient. And I was like, Lan, I want to hear these stories. You've heard them. I haven't heard them before. And so I was really excited to hear these stories, and just, again, hearing all these things was really, really cool. You also find out, as we're reading this, that Du, Lan and Hilo's father, was in the war. He was one of the generals in the war with his father, Lan's grandfather, as well as Ait Yugantin, and he was there and he died during the war. He, in fact, died 26 years ago. With doing some fast math, Hilo was 27 right now, and so that means Hilo would have been 1 year old when his father had passed. And so he basically never known his father at all. And so that was like, okay, this is, again, this like important context of the world here. What's going on? What's happening? We also kind of get mention of another character, of Shay, who I am assuming is Hilo and Lan's sister, that she's on her way back, that she had, I guess, a failed relationship with a Shatarian Espanian, and that it didn't work out, and she's on her way back, and so we're going to meet her, I'm sure, soon. But as we kind of continue on, we start to see that Kalsen, the grandfather, is not a super nice guy. To put it quite lightly, he is not a nice guy at all. He basically starts screaming at Lan and saying, "You're the pillar. You need to do what you need to do. Like, you need to make these decisions." And so then when Lan basically says, "Okay, well, I want to get rid of Doru, and I don't want to do it in a way that disrespects him. I want you to chat with him and convince him to retire in his old age, so that we don't show any disrespect to him." And basically, Kalsen says, like, "No, it's not happening. I don't even understand why you're saying this. He's been nothing but loyal to us. He's always been loyal to us. Why would you do that?" And in this, like, arguments going on, he drops a bomb that he's like, not like Hilo. Doru's stable, not like Hilo. And then he says, "While Du was off fighting for his country, who knows what swamp demon snuck into your mother's bedroom to spawn that boy." And it's like, oh, geez, okay. So planting the seed of maybe they're half brothers, maybe Du is not Hilo's father, but there's no confirmation to that, and that's maybe just Kalsen being, again, like a really dark guy, but just some demonstration of he's not a very nice man. And so he starts to say, all these things. We're not getting rid of Doru. And at some point, he says to Lan, "You might look like him, like his father, but you'll never be half the man he was. That's why the other clans think they can disrespect you. That's why Ainy left you. And you find out that Ainy, I guess, used to be Lan's wife, and that he let a jadeless foreigner walk off with his wife. And that even though Lan said to himself, I could have killed that guy, right? I could have killed him, no problem. But where's the honor in that? And if you love someone, don't you want them to be happy? And he knew that if he had killed that jadeless citizen, Ainy might have been able to stay, but she would have never loved him and always regretted it. And so, I don't know. I think that is a strong a showcase of character of Lan, that he let that happen. But clearly his grandfather does not. And so he says, okay, show me how green you are. And he basically starts just beating up his grandson. And Lan is kind of just like playing defense, blocking things, trying to be like, please stop. Like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to do this. And basically at one point he gets hit by his grandfather in such a way that kind of like causes him to react instinctually, knocks his grandfather in the head, knocks him down to the ground. And when he goes to his grandfather, he says, oh my God, are you all right? I'm so sorry. His grandfather basically like grabs him, pins him to the ground, and stands above him. And I thought this one was really cool. He was once again the towering torch of Kikon, as he's standing straight up above his grandson, and he says, only full intention. Jade amplifies what you have inside, what you intend. Without intention, no amount of Jade will make you powerful. Doru stays. And he sits down in his chair, and the last kind of lines of this chapter really solidify things. Only in this, just now, had his grandfather truly made him pillar, by proving to him, beyond a doubt, that he was alone. Silently, Len left the room and closed the door behind him. And so just yikes, like, that interaction between Kalsen and Lan is just a really tough interaction to see, and just highlights just like, okay, even though Lan is the pillar, there is this like awkward now situation of he's kind of the pillar, but his grandfather's still here, and he wants to be respectful to his grandfather, but he can't fully make his own decisions while he's there. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I have a strong feeling that Doru is not going to stay as Weatherman for very long, but I don't know how it's going to happen. I think that Lan's going to just kind of go against his grandfather's wishes and can Doru and say, hey, he's going to try and have that conversation. I don't think he wants to be disrespectful. It was super clear to me by reading these like 4 chapters, basically 2 from Hilo's perspective and then 2 from Lan's perspective, that Lan is clearly very emotional, right? And he thinks, I think, with a bit more emotion. He doesn't kill the foreigner that basically stole his wife. He lets both Sempa and Barrow go, even though Hilo was dead set on, I'm not going to let Barrow go. And so he clearly thinks a bit more emotionally, whereas Hilo maybe relies more on instincts and has a bit more violent tendencies. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play off of one another as the story progresses here in a little bit. And it's going to be interesting to see what's going on with Temben and what happened to Three Finger Gi and kind of how that affects what's going on. I think it was really cool to hear about the One Mountain Society and how, 8U and Kalsen used to work together, and they were effectively sounded like best friends until all these things happened, and kind of how we ended up where we are now. I think that was, very interesting to see that and see kind of how that happened. But what I'm also now interested to see as we move forward is like, I don't know in this story if we're only going to be looking at it through the No Peak perspective, or if we're going to get things from the Mountain Clan's perspective as well. I assume we have to be getting stuff from the Mountain Clan's perspective. I think it would be crazy for it to only be the No Peak, but it'd be pretty cool if it was just the No Peak perspective. So I'm interested to see where that goes and how that happens. Now, before kind of just we wrap up this set of chapters here, I wanted to just highlight my favorite quote from these 4 chapters, but I have a runner-up as well. So there's one runner-up that I just thought was really funny. It's in the first chapter as we're learning and we're talking to the Make brothers. One of them just says, "It smells like someone's pissing on us," and I just thought that was a really funny quote. Like just saying that, I don't know. I thought it was really, really comical. But the favorite quote for me from these 4 chapters is actually from Khal Sen in that last chapter, in chapter 4. The Shawties couldn't break the One Mountain Society, but we did. We split our clans. And again, I think for me, hearing that history of how they all fought together to effectively liberate Kakan, and now they're fighting over Janloon and fighting over the city and fighting for territory and fighting with each other. They were unified against a common enemy. Once that enemy was gone, they were no longer unified anymore. And I just thought that was really, really interesting. And so I'm really curious to see where things go as things progress here. Now, I mean, almost certainly there's going to be some kind of conflict between the Mountain and the No Peak clans. I'm curious to see where that goes. Like Temben and Three Finger Gi are clearly the catalyst. Like that's what's setting things off now. But where we go from here specifically, I'm not entirely sure. But join us in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to be reading chapters 5 to 8. So read those chapters, catch up, and then we'll be chatting about those all together in 2 weeks, and that will be on June 3rd. So we'll be reading chapters 5 to 8, and we'll be going over that on June 3rd. And that's the end of this chapter. Thank you for joining me on Chapters of Legend. I hope you found something new to notice, a detail to treasure, or a story thread to ponder until next time. If you're enjoying the journey, you can help others find the podcast by following, rating, or sharing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can find the show everywhere at Chapters of Legend, and you can email if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share at chaptersoflegend@gmail.com. And you can also follow me on YouTube for more random content there. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and keep living the legend.